Extra! Flash! The sensational roadshow Killers All is coming to this theater. Crowds have been jamming theaters and breaking attendance records everywhere. Here is but a glimpse of what you'll see. Remember the date. Hear the famous crime doctor. Hear the truth. You'll never forget what he tells you and shows you. Plus a sensational $5,000 lobby display. You'll see original, lifelike, full-size wax reproductions of John Dillinger, Machine Gun Kelly and Bonnie Parker, created by the famous artist Henri Bacon. Plus an exact reproduction of the electric death chair in Sing Sing Prison, something you've never seen before.
Red Hot Guns of Gangsters, the most talked about exhibit. See the famous Betsy, machine gun revolver of the Dillinger era, and the Iron Claw. Gangster shoulder holsters, gunman's weapons. See the famous bulletproof vest of the era. This famous bulletproof Dillinger era and the complete weapons that police use to counteract these madmen will be theater with a show picture.
You'll thrill to the powerful true stories of 6 gangsters, their lives, their deaths, lifelike wax figures, an electric chair, the death car. This sensational
John Dillinger began his career of crime in Mooresville, a quiet Indiana town southwest of Indianapolis. Bred on a farm nearby, he spent his youth idling about pool rooms with other boys, one of whom at least had as little moral backbone as Dillinger had. That boy's name was Ed Singleton. In 1924, Dillinger was 22 years old and wanted money. In this grocery store, owned by Frank Morgan, then 65 years old, Dillinger and Singleton assaulted the old proprietor and stole his wallet. But Morgan had recognized his assailants, and Singleton turned state's evidence. Dillinger was given 10 to 20 years in the Indiana Reformatory at Pendleton. Conflicting stories are told of Dillinger here. The probably true one is that his conduct in the reformatory was so outrageous that the authorities were compelled to send him to a place where discipline was more rigorous and where prison severities might teach him the folly and futility of crime as a career. What he learned in this new place of detention were the vicious secrets and habits of hardened criminals. This was in the penitentiary at Michigan City, where he remained until paroled in June 1933. Let us see where this arch foe of society sprang from. While his father ran this grocery store in Indianapolis in 1902, John Dillinger was born. The little house seems to give promise of better things. Here, 3 years later, Dillinger's mother, considering the gorilla her son turned out to be. John Dillinger's father was, and is, a respected citizen of Morgan County. Everyone liked him, and today everyone sympathizes with him. There's nothing but sorrow ahead for the old man. His son has taken the road to doom. From the homely shelter of this little farm, John Dillinger left to become the menace any officer would be justified in killing like a mad dog. A criminal and a fool, for John Dillinger is not smart. Only a fool thinks that crime pays. Crime never pays. John should have learned that simple truth in the Friends Church where he went as a boy, but he was too dumb. And so, 9 years after his first crime, he came out of jail just to get back in again at Lima. In his 4 months of liberty, Dillinger had identified himself as the leader in bank robberies in New Carlisle, Ohio, Farrell, Pennsylvania, Indianapolis, and Bluffton, Ohio. In Lima, he was to stand trial for the Bluffton robbery. This was in September 1933. But 2 days before Dillinger landed in the Lima jail, 10 men, jail friends of Dillinger's, shot their way out of Michigan City Penitentiary. Dillinger had engineered this break from the outside and had caused guns to be thrown over the walls to be picked up by the plotting desperados. Among the jailbreakers were 4 men of whom we'll hear later: Pierpont, Mackley, Clark, and Hamilton. These men seized a passing motor car, forced the occupants out, and sped away. No one knows their exact route, but Michigan City and its prison lay behind them, and the devil's dance was about to begin, and they were going to start it. They arrived at the Lima jail 5 days later. Representing themselves as Indiana officers, the quartet demanded Dillinger. Failing to get him, they murdered Sheriff Sarber, whose son, the present sheriff, sits on the steps in this picture. They secured the keys and calmly released their pal. The 5 escaped through this side door, ran down the sidewalk, screened from the street by bushes, leaped into an automobile at the curb, and fled. The wild game was on. Crime's hyenas were loose. Scene shifts to Tucson, Arizona, 11 days later. In this house, Dillinger was found and arrested. Again, 4 months had passed since Dillinger had left jail. These officers had him safe enough, however, and his arsenal as well. Arrested also were Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark, due to their own stupidity. The 3 bandits were living at the Congress Hotel when it caught fire. Mackley and Clark offered a fireman $12 to carry out their trunks. In their rooms, the firemen saw their guns, scrutinized the thugs, recognized them, and tipped off the police. Congratulations poured in on police. Court formalities were soon over, and Dillinger was flown by plane toward the cell yawning for him at Crown Point, Indiana, where he was to face the charge of murder in the slaying of O'Malley in East Chicago. The long arm of the law had reached John Dillinger, and he took his first ride in an airplane chained to it. In talking to reporters in Tucson, Dillinger admitted that he helped fix the jailbreak at Michigan City and tried to justify it because they were friends. "I stick to my friends," he said, "and they stick to me." But sticking to that sort of friends landed Dillinger back in Chicago on January 30th with the electric chair already casting its grisly shadow over him. Rushed to Crown Point, Dillinger was put in the custody of Sheriff Lillian Holly. She boasted that she could keep him, and he boasted she couldn't. This didn't prevent the amazing happy family picture in which Prosecutor Estill, who said he was confident that Dillinger would get the chair, and the sheriff posed with Dillinger in apparently affectionate intimacy. Now, there's to be a new prosecutor and a new sheriff, but there's no prisoner. But for the moment, Dillinger was safely guarded by deputies armed with machine guns, rifles, and revolvers, steel bars which looked okay, and it certainly looked mighty tough for the boastful, loud-mouthed Mr. John Dillinger. The third person to be made the goat by Dillinger at Crown Point, beside Estill and Mrs. Holly, was Judge William Murray, who refused to transfer Dillinger from Crown Point to Michigan City Penitentiary. Meanwhile, the 3 bashful thugs arrested with Dillinger in Arizona were being returned by the more prosaic method of train travel to Ohio. But behind the brick walls, Dillinger was whittling at a piece of wooden washboard and making plans. On March 3rd at 8:30 in the morning, armed with his wooden toy pistol, Dillinger overawed his guards, armed himself and a Negro fellow prisoner, Herbert Youngblood, with machine guns and revolvers from the sheriff's office, and walked out, forcing guard Ernest Blunk to accompany them. Through this kitchen and out the side entrance, unmolested and unhurried, the trio went, with Blunk always a bit ahead of Dillinger's machine gun muzzle. Spider Lake is near the town of Mercer. During the summer months, a popular resort, it has little or no patronage earlier in the year. It was to this point that Dillinger came with 3 other men and 3 women to Little Bohemia and spent 2 days. Emil Wanatka, the proprietor, was forced to serve the gang. Federal officers surrounded the place to surprise Dillinger, but Mrs. Wanatka's 2 dogs gave the alarm, and a blast of machine gun fire opened a battle royal. The body of W. Carter Baum, killed by the bandits. Baum makes the 14th death directly traceable to Dillinger. In Columbus, Dillinger's #1 friend, Harry Pierpont, awaits the day of his tragic march to the electric chair for his friendship. Friend #2, Charles Mackley, awaits the same day and fate through the same cause, the Dillinger curse. Friend #3, Russell Clark, is faced with prison for life for the same sinister association. Outside their cells, they can hear the shuffle of sullen men marching to other cells in which their soured and unhappy lives are spent in payment of their crimes. Hopelessness broods here. That or the searing death of hot bullets fired from eager guns. That or the knife of some friend turned assassin. Crime never pays.
The electric chair was again cheated when Dillinger was lured to this North Side Chicago theater by the Woman in Red to see Manhattan Melodrama, a then very popular gangster picture. Imagine Dillinger watching the screen Gangster as he began to walk the last mile. Like Dillinger, Gable in his role was a swaggering fellow. What thoughts must have passed through the mind of the woman sitting by Dillinger's side? It was past these stores that he and his girlfriend walked as they left the theater. Dillinger's sixth sense told him all was not well. His girlfriend dropped back. Dillinger scraped to a halt. The full significance of those grim approaching men was not lost to him. Suddenly he went into action for the last time. He ran for this alley, reaching for his guns. Bullets halted his mad rush. The guns of his assailants shot through. Dillinger was dead. He lay in a pool of his own blood in the filth of an alley. His body was rushed to the morgue at police headquarters. Dillinger's hair had been dyed jet black and cut very short. His eyebrows had been plucked to a fine line, and he had grown a small black mustache. He was definitely identified as the former public enemy #1. His body was sent home to his aged father for burial. Can you picture the sorrow of this poor old man? To have his son back home again, even though he was still in death, must have been a great load off of his aging shoulders.
Of murders and bank jobs, Bonnie and Clyde were boldly keeping a rendezvous with some of their henchmen near Grapevine, Texas. While they waited, they drank whiskey, made love to each other, and practiced their marksman by shooting at birds. Presently, 2 state highway patrol officers sighted the pair. They decide to investigate. They approach Bonnie and Clyde totally unaware of their identity. This atrocious murder sealed the doom of Bonnie and Clyde, for every peace officer in the entire Southwest became so enraged over this killing, they pledged themselves to sleepless days and nights in their search for this murdering pair. This untiring search finally brought the officers who were detailed to concentrate all of their efforts day and night to the apprehension of Bonnie and Clyde to a spot on a gravel road in the state of Louisiana. For 3 days and nights, these officers lay in wait on this road, but Bonnie and Clyde were wary. There is a sort of a tradition among peace officers of Texas that Barrow was possessed of some sixth sense, like a wild beast, which foretold of danger. But on this morning, this sixth sense did not serve to warn him of their presence.
It looks like the car, fellas. That's him for sure, I'll guarantee you. Get ready now. That's him, fellas. If he reaches for it, let him have it. Look down!
Death is at the steering wheel. The inevitable end, retribution. Here is Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, who died as they lived, by the gun. Bonnie is seen leaning against Clyde. Clyde was a master gunman. Seldom did anyone ever live when Clyde got the first shot. Clyde Barrow's mania, his guns, spiked at last by the law. 2 sawed-off shotguns, 2 machine rifles, 10 automatic pistols, and 1,500 rounds of ammunition. The Barrow and Parker death car. Every one of these holes was made by the steel-jacketed bullets from the high-powered rifles in the hands of the officers. Many of these bullets passed entirely through the door on Clyde's side, through Clyde's body, struck Bonnie, passed through her body, then out through the door on her side of the car. The officers were on the left side of the road, nearest the driver. This explains the fact that Bonnie's body had more bullet holes than Clyde's. Any one of these bullets would have been fatal to both, but after having killed 14 people, most of whom were officers of the law, and having come safely through so many gun battles, it did not seem advisable to fire just 1 bullet. 4 of the 6 officers who brought down Bonnie and Clyde. On the left, Deputy Sheriff Oakley. Next, Sheriff Jordan, in whose parish in Louisiana Bonnie and Clyde met their death. Next to Sheriff Jordan is Deputy Sheriff Bob Alcorn of Dallas County, Texas, upon whose shoulders rested the tremendous responsibility of positively identifying Bonnie and Clyde as they came down the road. He was the only man in the party who knew Barrow and Bonnie on sight. Not a gun could be fired until he gave the word. At the right is Alcorn's partner, Deputy Sheriff Ted Hinton of Dallas County, Texas, who with Alcorn trailed Bonnie and Clyde for many months.
Bonnie's burial was attended only by close friends and relatives, numbering about 150, including her sister Billy Mace, who was a prisoner of the law, charged with the killing of 2 state highway patrolmen, for which crime her sister Bonnie had been accused. Billy Mace was attended at the funeral by 2 deputy sheriffs and a matron of the jail. Clyde Barrow's mother and father, seen in the background, and his brother also paid their respects to the girl who was Clyde's only friend and who died by his side. In the last few words of Bonnie's own poem, which she penned just prior to her death, to a few it means grief, to the law it's relief, but it's death to Bonnie and Clyde. Just 3 months to the day after the killing of Dillinger, Melvin Purvis and his gang of officers killed Pretty Boy Floyd in a running gun battle near the small village of Wellsville, Ohio. Here he is seen with his body riddled with bullets, shortly before it was sent home to his aged mother. Thus sorrow fell again on another humble home. 1934 was a banner year for the Department of Justice under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover. In Chicago, Babyface Nelson was shot in a running duel with G-men. Fred Barker and his mother, Ma Barker, died in their Florida bungalow, their bodies riddled with machine gun bullets. The year 1935 found the G-men working at top speed. Many kidnappers were rounded up, among whom was Bruno Richard Hauptmann, who died in the electric chair for the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. Alvin Karpus, who more than 2 years ago shot his way out of an Atlantic City hotel, was captured in an apartment in New Orleans on May 1st, 1936, by J. Edgar Hoover and his G-men. Quickly following his capture, Harry Campbell, one of Karpus' henchmen, was captured in Toledo, Ohio. Before the papers could get onto the street with this announcement, G-men reported the capture of William Mahon, wanted in the Weyerhaeuser kidnapping. Climaxing a sensational 10-day roundup of the nation's public enemies, on May 11, 1936, the federal agents captured the last of the public enemies, Thomas H. Robinson of Mrs. Alice Stowe. The alertness of this obscure clerk, Lynn Allen, led to Robinson's capture, who wanted as a woman. It was on up to the drugstore where Allen was employed, and whose suspicions were so aroused by Robinson's actions that he notified the Pasadena authorities. The G-men were called in, and he was soon traced to this modest little home in Glendale, California, where he was taken without a struggle. The deadsters are vanishing from our nation. Crime can and will be put down in America. The Department of Justice is leading the way and deserves a vote of thanks from every right-thinking person in America.